42 var inne.
Ja, hjälp! Verkstadsgatan 2B, Arboga. 3 personer. Emma blöder jättemycket.
Ja.
Vad fan har hänt? Emma.
Arboga, Sweden, March 17th, 2008. It was a cold, typical night that month. In the warmth of her home, a mother was lovingly caring for her 2 children. Emma Ljungestig, 23, mother to Max, 3, and Saga, 1.5, was having what seemed to be an ordinary evening. Emma was preparing dinner, waiting for her fiancé, Thorn Hellberg, to come home from work. While cooking, Emma chatted online with her sister, Katarina. They exchanged messages about plans for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. But suddenly, at 7:07 p.m., the conversation just stopped mid-sentence. Complete silence. Katarina found it strange and sent another message asking if everything was okay. No response. She then tried calling Emma several times, but every call went straight to voicemail. Katarina felt something was seriously wrong. Desperate, she called Thorn, Emma's fiancé, who was on his way home. He tried to reassure her, saying maybe Emma had just left her phone charging or got distracted with the kids. But when Thorn got home, he found the front door unlocked. That never happened in their house. He called out for Emma and the children, and no one answers. The silence in the house is unusual. A chill runs down his spine as soon as he steps inside. He immediately notices the house is completely trashed. At first, he thinks the 2 kids went overboard with their play, but soon he realizes the destruction is far too severe to be just a game. Then something catches his eye at the far end of the room. It's Emma. She's on the floor, almost unrecognizable. Thorn goes into shock, but quickly remembers the 2 little ones, Saga and Max, and rushes upstairs to check on them. As he approaches, panic takes over his mind, and what he finds is a scene no one should ever see. Max and Saga lie on the floor, covered in blood. Their heads and faces are completely destroyed. Before we dive back into the case, we need to rewind time to get the full picture. Emma Ljungestig was born on February 16, 1985 in Stockholm, Sweden's capital. From a young age, she dreamed of something simple. A family and a modest home would be enough. For a while, it seemed like everything was falling into place the way Emma wanted. At 19, in love with her high school boyfriend, a young man named Nicholas, she got married, believing she was taking the first step toward building that future. Sometime later, their first son, Max, was born. A sweet boy with alert eyes who changed everything between them. The house got more exhausting, but also happier. About a year and a half later, little Saga arrived. What was supposed to be a peaceful, loving home turned into a battleground. Immaturity, exhaustion, and daily struggles sparked fights between the couple. Soon after Saga's birth, the couple decided to separate. It wasn't an amicable split. In fact, it was full of tension. The exes went to court multiple times, battling over child custody and support payments. At one point, Nicholas told Emma he wanted to get back together, but by then, Emma wanted nothing to do with him. So she chose to move on with her kids, and she decided to relocate to start fresh. She chose Arboga, a small, quiet town of about 11,000 people, located about 93 miles from Stockholm. Arboga is the kind of place people seek for its peaceful vibe. It's a place where nobody expects anything bad to happen, but that was about to change. It was in Arboga that Emma met Thorn Hellberg, a simple, kind, hard-working guy. They met online and quickly felt they wanted to be together. At first, Emma worried Thorn wouldn't like that she already had 2 kids from a previous relationship, but Thorn didn't care and accepted Emma and her kids without hesitation. Thorn saw in Emma and the children a chance to have a family, something he'd always wanted. In the first months, he treated Max and Saga like they were his own. The kids quickly grew attached to him. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt she might have found the right person. Emma and Thorn's relationship started just 1 year after her divorce. Everything moved fast, and they realized they couldn't live without each other. In just 2 months, they bought a house together and began building a future. They set their wedding for summer 2008. Everything pointed to a true fresh start. But that dream was brutally shattered that winter night when Thorn came home from work and found his new family almost wiped out. Even in shock, he managed to call emergency services, and when paramedics arrived, they were horrified. The crime scene looked like something out of a horror movie. Yet despite everything, All three were still alive. Critical, but alive.
Ja, hjälp! Verktygsgatan 2B Arboga. 3 personer. En blöder jättemycket. 2 barn.
Men ta det lite lugnt nu. Vart är du någonstans?
Verktygsgatan 2B Arboga.
Vad är det som har hänt där då?
Jag vet inte. 2 barn. 1,5-åring. Och en... Shit, det ser ut som hackhål i. Vad fan är det här? Okej, vänta. Jag måste bara lägga ifrån mig telefonen lite stund.
Ja, jag väntar.
Kom igen.
Kniv, ja.
Vad fan är det? Emma.
Hallå, hittar du dem nu eller?
Emma and the children were rushed to the hospital and placed in intensive care. The doctors told Thorne their chances were slim, and if they survived, they would likely have lasting damage. While the medical team fought to save Emma and the kids, detectives worked to figure out what had happened in the house. The more they examined the scene, the deeper the mystery grew. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood from anyone else in the house, nothing to suggest a random burglar. The only certainty for the detectives was that this wasn't a robbery. None of the victims' valuables were taken. Wallets, money, jewelry, and everything of value were still there, all in their proper places. Nothing was missing. To the detectives, this made it clear it was a targeted attack. An attack meant to wipe those people out. The police concluded it was something personal, very personal, with a lot of hatred behind it. According to the police, the murder weapon was not found at the scene, but they believed it was something heavy, like an iron bar or a hammer. The attacker delivered multiple blows to Emma and her children. His clear intent was to kill them, and he made sure of it. In the desperate attempt to save Emma and the kids, paramedics unintentionally disturbed the entire crime scene. This delayed the investigation somewhat, but given the severity, the paramedics had to do what was necessary. Even after a thorough forensic examination, Swedish police found nothing of significance. No fingerprints, no hair strands from anyone outside the family, and no biological material that could provide DNA. Officers began to theorize that the perpetrator might be someone the family knew. The first suspect on the list was Thorne Hellberg. He called emergency services at 7:20 p.m. Emma had stopped responding to her sister's messages at 7:07 p.m., just a 13-minute window. Police theorized that only someone familiar with the family's routine could commit the crime in such a short time and escape unnoticed. To them, everything pointed to an insider, someone with access to the house, knowledge of the routine, and a motive. However, Thorne's co-workers confirmed he worked his full shift that day. Moreover, security cameras along Thorne's route from work to home recorded him returning after his shift ended. The timestamps on the footage showed that during the time of the crime, from 7:07 p.m. to around 7:18 p.m., Thorne was still on his way home. Thorne arrived around 7:20 p.m. and immediately called emergency services. Because of this, Thorne was ruled out as a suspect. Authorities believe it's very likely that while heading home, Thorne crossed paths with the attacker somewhere along the way. The second suspect on the list was Nicholas, Emma's ex-husband. The police were almost certain the crime was personal. Nothing in the house was stolen. It was either something personal or a maniac on the loose. But first, they had to investigate those closest to Emma. With Thorne cleared, Nicholas was the next potential suspect. Nicholas and Emma had a troubled history. They fought frequently, and their separation was far from friendly. Emma had even filed a complaint against Nicholas for assault. To the police, Nicholas might have committed the crime out of revenge. However, after investigating, they found Nicholas was in another city at the time of the attack, so he was cleared. Additionally, Thorne told police that Nicholas and Emma no longer fought and had settled their issues a long time ago.
Vi har nyss fått reda på att dina barn har avlidit av sina skador. Och jag bröt upp totalt. Men jag fick ju inte direkt någon lugn stund för mig själv, liknande ungefär på sin höjd 2 minuter efter det. Så kastade han i mitt ansikte att åklagaren vill anhålla mig för misstänkt för mordet. Eller för 2 mord och mordförsök på Emma.
Vad tänkte du då?
Då försvann jag. Så vet jag inte vad han sa eller liknande. Blev väl mer eller mindre svårt chockad över att ens få det kastat i ansiktet som så. Efter en stund, jag vet inte alls hur lång tid, det kan inte kännas som en hel evighet då, men så frågade han hur jag ställer mig till det. Då sa jag en jävla dum fråga. Jaha, hur ska jag tolka det? Jag har inte gjort någonting, jag har varit i Motala hela dagen.
Thorne also said he got along with Nicholas and didn't believe Nicholas was capable of doing that to his own kids. The police spoke with many people close to Emma, friends, family, and neighbors. Authorities hoped to gather information that could point to someone wanting revenge on Emma for any reason. However, everyone the police interviewed said Emma had no enemies or anyone wishing her harm. The only person mentioned was Nicholas, Emma's ex, but since he was investigated and cleared, the police were left with no leads. After giving his statement, Thorne, deeply shaken, left the station. He was so distressed he couldn't even drive, so Emma's father had to pick him up that day. Once in his father-in-law's car, Thorne fell into complete silence. The atmosphere was so heavy neither of them could say a word. While driving to the hospital to visit Emma, her father tried to break the silence by turning on the radio. He hoped to hear music on the local station, but instead, a news report was on, the worst news they could hear. The announcer spoke about the brutal crime, its victims Emma and her children, and how the whole town was in shock. Then came the heartbreaking news. Max and Saga had succumbed to their injuries just minutes earlier. Hearing that, Thorne and Emma's father broke down in tears. It was as if their world had collapsed. Not long ago, those two innocent children were playing carefree in the comfort of their home, and now they were gone. For the family, nothing about this made sense, nothing at all. Because of the case's impact, the Arboga police faced pressure like never before. They got stuck, unsure which lead to follow. So they decided to focus the investigation on Nicholas, even though he'd proven he wasn't involved. As mentioned, Nicholas was in another city when the crime happened, so it was impossible for him to be responsible. Still, the police held Nicholas in preventive custody and took him in for questioning again. Having just lost his two children, Nicholas was devastated and barely able to answer the officers' questions. He trembled constantly, cried, and seemed completely out of it. He was worse than the last time police spoke to him. Then, he still hoped his kids might survive. Soon, police realized they wouldn't get anything useful from Nicholas. They checked everything they could, and it was clear he wasn't responsible, especially since he was elsewhere when it all happened. Nicholas was released, and the investigation hit another dead end.
Jag fick inte prata med kurator, ingen psykolog, ingenting. Förutom på tisdag eftermiddag då. Men då var det bara en psykolog som jobbade för polisens del och kollade om jag var självmord eller inte.
Kunde du känna en oro för att de kanske aldrig kommer att tro på att jag är oskyldig?
Oh ja. Jag var ju rädd räcker väl inte att säga. Livrädd, ja det är väl en begynnelse. Men alltså, jag var ju otroligt orolig. För spelar det någon roll vad jag säger? De har väl förutfattat mening. Jag var ju dömd. Det är jag som har gjort det.
The investigators didn't know which direction to take, and daily pressure from media and public grew. The only hope left was for Emma to wake from her coma and tell what happened, even if she might not remember due to the physical and psychological trauma. The doctors caring for Emma were realistic with the police. They said that if Emma survived, there was a high chance she would have lasting damage, including loss of movement in parts of her body and speech. They also said it was very unlikely Emma would remember anything, since she had suffered significant brain damage. From the day Emma was admitted, a police team was assigned to protect her and her children. The police feared the attacker might come back to finish the job. After Emma's children died, the team focused on guarding her in the hospital, controlling who came in and out of her room. With each passing day, the community grew more afraid, worried a maniac was still at large and could strike again. This completely changed the daily life in Arboga and nearby areas. People stopped wandering the streets unless absolutely necessary. Kids could no longer play outside with friends, and everyone double-checked their doors and windows multiple times a day. Even without any leads on who committed the brutal crime, the police were determined and refused to give up without exploring every possibility. Then, in a joint effort with officers from neighboring towns, they went door to door in the neighborhood and surrounding areas where the crime happened. Authorities asked every resident if they'd seen anyone suspicious that night or knew anything about the case. They did a full neighborhood sweep, but no one nearby had seen anything useful to the police. Next, they decided to check all security cameras in the area, not just the ones closest to Emma's house, which they had already reviewed. The plan was clear: track any suspicious movement near the house during the time of the crime. Besides reviewing footage from farther cameras, police conducted another thorough sweep of the neighborhood and surrounding areas. The murder weapon, likely an iron bar or hammer, wasn't found in the house, so police hoped to find it if the attacker had discarded it while fleeing. That's when tracking dogs came into play. Every corner, bush, and trash bin was searched, but nothing was found. Footage from cameras on other streets also led nowhere. Meanwhile, a new, more detailed forensic exam was done at Emma's house. Police found nothing new except a small shoe print, not belonging to anyone in the family. Judging by its size, they theorized it belonged to a child around 10 to 12 years old, or a short-statured woman. To them, the print wasn't a big deal, probably someone familiar who had visited the house recently. Still, they conducted a small forensic analysis on the print, recording its size and sole pattern. While police ramped up evidence searches and investigations, Emma kept fighting for her life. Days passed and the mystery only deepened. The media covered the case daily. Security experts and investigators appeared on TV shows to share their professional opinions. That fueled countless theories, but none that helped the investigation. It was a tense moment in such a quiet region, and everyone asked the same question: who could have done this? The media and authorities urged anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. Then finally, something new surfaced. A man who had walked past Emma's house around 7 p.m. contacted the police. He said he saw someone standing on the sidewalk in front of the victim's home. The person was dressed all in black, hood up, hesitating whether to enter the house, like they were unsure. Minutes later, the same man passed by again. He had gone to the supermarket to grab something and came back quickly. About 10 minutes had passed. That's when he said he saw the same all-black figure running out of the house and jumping into a car that sped away. According to the man, everything happened so fast he couldn't see the person's face or identify the car model. However, there was one detail he couldn't ignore. He was sure the person was a woman. This information was crucial for the investigation. For the first time, the case took a new direction, a very real possibility backed by a witness who saw something important. From that moment, detectives shifted focus, cross-checking names, checking lists, and verifying alibis of all women close to Emma. If a woman committed the crime, she couldn't be far. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a new hope began to emerge. Emma's condition, still in a coma, showed slight improvement. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but for doctors and family, it was huge. Then, on March 27th, 10 days after the attack, doctors decided it was time to try waking her from the induced coma. They gradually reduced her sedatives to let her slowly come back and allow her body to readjust. Many following the case, especially Emma's family, hoped for the best. And finally, the wait was over. Emma woke up. At first, she couldn't speak but moved her eyes. She only responded with her eyes, recognizing the faces around her. Everything had to be handled with extreme care, because the news she'd get upon waking could shock her and undo all the progress the doctors had made. She was fragile, both physically and emotionally. One wrong move could ruin everything. The doctors were clear. Under no circumstances should she be told about her children, at least not yet. Authorities decided to wait 3 days after Emma woke. After those 3 days, detectives entered her hospital room and began trying to talk to her slowly. But the worst happened. Emma remembered nothing. She looked at the detectives with a mix of confusion and desperation. She had no idea what happened and kept asking about her children. Faced with this, doctors realized they couldn't hide the painful truth any longer. And so came the hardest news of Emma's life. Her children were dead. Emma was devastated. She refused to believe it, wishing it was all a nightmare. But unfortunately, it was real. Then, on April 1st, the breakthrough everyone hoped for came. Emma finally remembered what happened that night. She told police that while talking to her sister online, someone knocked on the door. Emma went to open it, and came face to face with a hooded figure dressed all in black. The person only said her name was Tina. Without warning, she struck Emma with a hard, precise blow using a hammer. Emma said she lost all senses right there in the hallway. That was the only thing Emma remembered, but it confirmed the attacker was a woman. After that, police showed Emma photos of various women they thought were suspects. Among them was a woman named Christine Schurer. The moment Emma saw her photo, she didn't hesitate. She immediately pointed and said this was the woman who knocked on her door that fateful day. But who was this woman? And why would she do something so terrible to a family? Christine Schurer was born in Germany and was 31 at the time. Her childhood was troubled. When she was 11, her father abandoned the family, leaving her deeply shaken. Christine always lived intensely. She lived in New York, Greece, worked in archaeological digs, and in hotels. She hated staying still and always wanted to be somewhere new. Those who knew her would say she was cultured and adventurous. But behind that was a woman extremely controlling, possessive, and vengeful. Her relationships with men followed a pattern, intense and fast, mostly ending badly. She couldn't maintain a healthy relationship for long. She also couldn't handle rejection, something experts say stemmed from her father's abandonment. In this context, in August 2006, while working in Greece, Christine met a Swedish man named Thorn. Yes, the same Thorn who is now engaged to Emma. At the time, Thorn was on vacation, staying at the hotel where Christine worked. They quickly got involved and shared a 5-day romance. When Thorn's vacation ended, he returned to Sweden. They kept in touch long distance, and Christine, head over heels, didn't want to waste time. Sometime later, she flew to Sweden to visit Thorn without telling him. When she arrived, Thorn was caught off guard, unsure what to do. But out of politeness, he let her stay at his place. Over time, Thorn realized Christine wasn't who he thought she was. She started showing her controlling and possessive side. She made a fuss over everything. Her demands were constant, even early in the relationship. After 5 months, Thorn decided to end it and go their separate ways. Christine was furious, especially since Thorn broke up with her over the phone when she had returned home to sort out some personal issues. She had planned to resolve her problems and then come back to Sweden to be with him. But he ended things and told her not to come back to Sweden to visit him again. Christine refused to accept the breakup and started sending Thorn countless messages, forcing him to block her number. Later, she got a new number and resumed messaging him, making Thorn realize he'd have to change his phone number to get some peace. When Christine found out Thorn changed his number, she began sending letters to his house. In those letters, she begged for a second chance, saying she loved him. Christine was desperate to win back a man who had already moved on. In March 2007, she showed up unannounced in Sweden again and convinced Thorn to go out to dinner. They had nothing between them and hadn't talked for a while. Still, Thorn accepted but made it clear it was just as friends. Christine pretended to agree. But right after dinner, she pressured him to get back together. She said it was his last chance to save what they had. Despite her insistence, Thorn stood firm, saying he wanted nothing more with her and she should forget him. Sources say that by then, Thorn and Emma already knew each other and were starting their relationship. Reluctantly, Christine pretended to accept Thorn's words and left after dinner. The next day, she called him saying she was lost. She claimed she was trying to return to her country but got lost near a castle. Thorn got very worried and decided to help since he knew the area. When he arrived, he was shocked. Christine was unconscious in the car. She'd taken a large amount of pills, clearly trying to end her life after not accepting his rejection. Thorn rushed her to the hospital. He was deeply concerned and knew leaving her alone could lead to disaster. So he took her to her parents' home in Germany and told them what happened, asking them to admit her because she was a danger to herself. Thorn was right. Christine was a danger to herself and a bigger danger to others. She was hospitalized for 3 weeks in a psychiatric clinic, but it didn't change anything. In summer 2007, Christine returned to Sweden, this time to stay. She settled in Stockholm, the capital, without Thorn knowing. In February 2008, Christine went after Thorn again, with shocking news. She told him she had a child by him. Christine told Thorn she had gotten pregnant during their relationship, but because of her mental condition and the breakup, she decided to give the child up for adoption. Thorn was very confused by this story. He did the math, and the dates didn't match. There was no way Christine could have gotten pregnant by him and had a child in that time frame. When Thorn tried to confirm whether Christine's story was true by asking details like the child's birth date, Christine always dodged the questions and didn't answer. She just said it wasn't important. Thorne, who was already doubting Christine's story, became even more suspicious. It sounded more like a fabrication from her imagination. Thorne was sure Christine made up the whole story just to get closer to him again. But Christine didn't stop there. She told Thorne that their supposed child had a genetic blood disease and that the adoptive parents could contact him at any time to deal with it. By that time, Thorne was already in a relationship with Emma, living with her and her 2 children, which made everything more complicated. When Christine found out, she pretended not to care and said that, for her, everything was fine since she and Thorne had nothing anymore. Emma, who knew the whole story about Thorne and Christine because he had told her everything, said Christine's story sounded very far-fetched. Thorne, who was already suspicious, agreed with Emma. In the days that followed, Thorne asked Christine a series of questions about the supposed child they had together. Christine stayed defensive, dodging the questions and sometimes saying disconnected and nonsensical things. Thorne asked where the baby was born. He did this because if she gave the exact place, probably a hospital, he could check for any records. But Christine kept dodging and repeated that it wasn't important. It didn't take long for Thorne to realize Christine was just stalling, buying time to maybe convince him to get back with her. Thorne was very happy with Emma, so the idea of getting back with Christine didn't even cross his mind. He decided it was best to cut all contact with Christine once and for all, knowing the whole story about having a child together was a lie. Again, Thorne told Christine to move on and leave him alone, because he was now in a new relationship, happy, and planning a family with his new partner. Christine accepted Thorne's decision, or at least pretended to, but inside she was burning with hatred. In her mind, she promised herself she wouldn't be abandoned again and decided she would take revenge. The police only started considering Christine a suspect after Thorne mentioned in his statement that he had an ex who was a bit crazy. He only revealed Christine after police told him the culprit might be a woman. Before that, it never crossed Thorne's mind that Christine could be behind it all. He knew Christine was troubled, but never imagined she'd go that far. Thorne even thought Christine had gone back to Germany since she never contacted him again. What Thorne didn't know was that Christine stayed in Sweden, just waiting for the right moment to carry out her revenge plan. So when Thorne told the authorities about Christine Schurer, they quickly investigated her and later showed her photo to Emma in the hospital, who immediately identified her as the attacker. After Emma pointed Christine out as the perpetrator, the authorities went after her. News that Christine Schurer had been identified as responsible by the only surviving victim spread fast across Sweden. Several newspapers covered the story, and many celebrated that the culprit behind that horrific crime had finally been found. Christine Schurer was arrested shortly after in Germany and extradited to Sweden. In her first statement, Christine denied everything and claimed no involvement. The police searched an apartment Christine had rented in Sweden and found some belongings: clothes, phones, and most importantly, her laptop. Among her clothes was a coat matching the description of the one she was seen wearing on the night of the crime. The coat was sent for analysis but showed no traces, no blood or hair from the victims. Police believed that given the brutality of the attack, the coat was likely soaked in blood, but Christine had meticulously cleaned it. There wasn't a single trace left. She had wiped away every bit of evidence, but the same couldn't be said for her laptop. On it, investigators found a mountain of incriminating material. There were multiple photos of Emma and her children. They also found a detailed floor plan of the house the family lived in, with disturbing notes about the interior layout. In her search history, police discovered she had been obsessively monitoring Emma's social media accounts and researching how to cover up a crime. Christine was completely obsessed. In the apartment, police also found a diary. Inside, Christine had written pages filled with hatred toward Emma and her children. The diary also contained the family's address, the children's daily routines, and the times Emma and Thorne left for and returned from work. Everything was recorded daily. Christine had been gathering information for quite a while, proof that the attack was fully planned and premeditated. She had never moved on from being rejected, and with each passing day, her hatred for Thorne, Emma, and their children grew stronger. She was hell-bent on destroying Thorne's life, and in her mind, if she couldn't have him, then no one else would. On top of all that, a shoe found in her apartment matched the footprint left at the crime scene. and security footage from the Arboga train station captured Christine both arriving and leaving the city on the day of the crime. With all the evidence stacked against her, plus Emma's testimony, the authorities knew that even if Christine didn't confess, it wouldn't make a difference. They already had more than enough to convict her. 3 months after the crime, on July 29, 2008, Christine Schurer's trial began. Everyone in the courtroom was stunned by Christine's behavior. She showed no concern for the consequences of her actions, nor did she display a shred of remorse. She waved and smiled at people in the courtroom as if the whole thing was a joke. When the prosecution displayed photos of the crime scene on the screen, including pictures of the victims before the attack, Christine started laughing out loud. Her reaction made many wonder whether she was truly that cold or if she had some kind of mental disorder. Seeing a possible opening, her defense requested a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether she was mentally fit to stand trial. It's worth noting that Christine had previously spent some time in a clinic after attempting to take her own life. Before the trial, the authorities had already tried to get her evaluated, but Christine refused to cooperate, so the exam couldn't be carried out at the time. Given her behavior in court, many assumed she had some form of psychological disturbance. But after the evaluation was finally conducted, it was confirmed that Christine was completely sane and fully aware of her actions. This revelation left people shocked, staggered by the sheer cruelty of a woman who turned out to be cold, calculating, and psychopathic. Even as the trial moved forward and the evidence piled up, Christine kept denying she had anything to do with the crime. She mocked the entire situation but still refused to admit what she had done. Christine's defense argued that the evidence against her was unreliable. They claimed she couldn't be found guilty if her DNA wasn't present at the crime scene and if there was no DNA from the victims on her clothes. They also pointed out that the murder weapon hadn't even been found, so according to them, there was no solid proof tying Christine to the crime. In response, the prosecution brought in a key witness, a woman who had shared an apartment with Christine while she was living in Sweden. According to the witness, she owned a toolkit, and one day when she needed it, she noticed her hammer was missing. She searched the apartment and even asked Christine about it, but the hammer was nowhere to be found. Christine claimed she had no idea where it had gone. The witness then revealed that the hammer went missing around the same time the crime took place. To the prosecution, this was no coincidence. They were convinced that this was the very hammer Christine used to carry out the brutal attack. The prosecution built its case on a combination of circumstantial evidence, the testimony of the surviving victim, the woman who lived with Christine, and a man who reported seeing a woman entering and leaving the victim's home. More than 40 people testified in court, and the contents of Christine's laptop were presented as evidence. The prosecution laid it all out. Dozens of photos of Emma and her children, detailed floor plans of their home, and Christine's search history, filled with terms on how to erase traces of a crime. In addition, the footprint found at the crime scene matched a pair of sneakers that Christine had in her apartment. During the trial, Emma, who initially couldn't remember much about the day of the attack, began to recall fragments of what happened as soon as she saw Christine in court. She remembered the moment of the attack, how she fell and tried to get back up while Christine was striking her. Emma described it as a horrific experience, made even worse by the fact that she couldn't protect her own children. Given the overwhelming amount of testimony, evidence, and proof against Christine, the jury had no doubt and unanimously found her guilty on all charges. Christine Schurer was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay 100,000 Swedish kroner, around $9,000 US, in compensation to Emma. Christine's defense team tried to appeal the verdict, but the court stood firm and rejected their request. In March 2012, Christine was transferred to a women's prison in Vechta, Germany, to serve her sentence. Emma's recovery was slow and painful. The physical wounds eventually healed, but the emotional scars likely never will. She had Thorne's full support, and little by little she began to rebuild her life. Nicholas rebuilt his life as best he could. He remarried and they had a daughter named Mirali. In 2010, Emma and Thorne got married and later had 2 more children who grew up learning about the older siblings that came before them. And so step by step, the family managed to move forward. And you, tell me in the comments if you already knew this story and what you thought about it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.